Business Plus. ICMR releases new dietary guidelines, advises against consumption of milk tea, artificial protein supplements. And more bad news emerging for COVID vaccine makers. AstraZeneca COVID vaccine linked to another fatal blood clotting disorder. Study finds over 30% co-vaccine takers also reported adverse impact. And government to crack down on fake reviews after complaints surge. New court to disallow e-commerce platforms to alter or edit reviews. And dumping of Chinese goods in India may intensify. Federation of Indian Export Organization warns after worsening US-China trade relations. And Tata Motors is now most valuable Tata Group company, overtakes TCS as the group's most profitable firm after 10 years. And Zoho is all set to enter the semiconductor market, could pledge an investment of up to $700 million for the same. I'm Shweta Kothari and you're watching Business Plus. Let's talk about something that is close to both our hearts and our stomachs: food. Do you always believe that food cooked at your home is automatically healthy? If your answer is yes, you might want to think again. There is a likelihood of home-cooked food being harmful to your health if it's loaded with high fat, sugar or salt, often called the HFSS foods. These HFSS foods are big no-no for good health as per the latest dietary guidelines for Indians released by Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, and the National Institute of Nutrition. The report has rolled out curious dietary guidelines and there's a lot to digest there, both literally and metaphorically. Here's what you should know. Number one, what should you intake? Well, lots of vegetables, whole grains such as brown rice, whole wheat, pulses which are rich in protein, nuts and seeds, although in moderate quantity, fruits, but be mindful of the natural sugar content, and of course yogurt or curd. Number two, in terms of what you should drink, obviously drink adequate quantity of water and milk, and also avoid ultra-processed items like cold drinks or any diet soda. Number three, avoid HFSS food. Remember, high fat, high sugar or salt. Now, avoid these foods, and avoiding them is important as they contain high calorie and are low in essential nutrient and fiber. ICMR also has a take on protein supplements. While there is enough debate whether protein supplements are healthy enough or not, ICMR recommends avoiding such supplements altogether for gaining body mass at all. In fact, the report emphasizes on getting protein from naturally derived food sources as opposed to artificial intake. The same goes for processed foods and excessive use of salt. Here's also one that you may be wary of. For all the tea and coffee lovers, the guideline recommends avoiding milk tea and coffee an hour prior or after meals. And last but not the least, ICMR also has two practical pro tips. Number one is exercise regularly and stay physically fit. And number two is be careful about reading food labels on everything you consume. The report advises that individuals should make informed decisions about their dietary habits and look out for hidden sugars, unhealthy fats and high salt content in their food items. Overall, the report emphasizes on meeting requirements of essential nutrients and prevent disease through a healthy diet. Well, moving on now. Over a week after AstraZeneca announced a global withdrawal of its vaccine against coronavirus, researchers have found that AstraZeneca vaccine sold in India under brand name Covishield is linked to a rare blood clotting disorder called vaccine-induced immune thrombocytopenia and thrombosis, a rare side effect associated with blood clotting. Not just Covishield, in fact, Covaxin is no safer. Over 30% Covaxin takers have reported adverse events. Close to 1/3 of the 900 individuals receiving Covaxin shots developed some kind of adverse impact, whereas upper respiratory tract infections were common and found nearly in 50% of adolescents who received the India-made vaccine. The study was conducted by Banaras Hindu University and has found long-term adverse effects of indigenous vaccine, Covaxin, identifying serious consequences in at least 1% of the total subjects who received Covaxin. More details and data now emerging. Karthik Malhotra here with me. On Karthik, what were the adverse impact of all the vaccines which were made available? Days earlier, we heard of AstraZeneca causing that rare disease of blood clotting. There is more study now that proves that, in fact, this disease is real. It happens in 1 or at least 7 to 1 million cases. But Covaxin is where I think one needs to be more careful of what the data is coming out.
I mean, I think officially some reports need to be released, and nobody better than ICMR actually to come out with these reports. And of course, the Ministry of Health needs to kick into action to really now at some point make a very, very clear guideline that until at least you're able to clearly establish a linkage between the COVID vaccines and a potential side effect of those, should you continue administering them, or should there at least right now be a full stop and withdraw these vaccines until the study is properly conducted? Now, talking specifically about the AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine and the TTS condition that comes out of it, it's very difficult to pronounce, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the side effects that emerge from it happen in very, very rare cases, and the numbers are actually skewed in favor of those who get the vaccine as against those who develop side effects with them. So 7 in a million is actually not a large number, but obviously every life matters and every life counts, and there should be enough and more research and study and disclaimers to establish that linkage and necessary action be taken. In the case of Covaxin, the methodology of the study is a little different. So Banaras Hindu University has actually conducted interviews and perhaps not laboratory testing of those who have received the vaccine to establish a real cause and effect relationship. So in the absence of a proper lab test, to take any decision would be a little premature, but I think one decision which the government can take...
This is some sort of preliminary data though, which should lead into more research.
Absolutely.
Perhaps.
So I think one decision which may not or should not be delayed right now, especially given that the overall number of COVID cases, not just in India but in the world, have reduced significantly, perhaps put a pause to the vaccination drive right now. Don't administer the vaccines until obviously more research is undertaken and more solid results are able to establish a causal relationship with the reported side effects of the vaccines.
At this point in time, and since we are a little far ahead of pandemic, most of the population, in fact 99% of the population is already vaccinated. A lot of people who used to cry foul when or after vaccination were done now stand a chance to actually go to court and challenge some of these vaccine makers, and they're doing so in the UK. There may be more cases coming out now in India because many of these people have reported adverse effects. Some people have died, and all these news items did not see the light of the day back then because it was more important to get a majority of the population vaccinated. That was the priority. But I think now at this point in time, with more such data being made available, more people have a chance to actually challenge the vaccine makers on what that vaccine did to them.
Sure. I think, any sort of, legal cases cannot be ruled out. But I think even the courts, to my limited understanding, will eventually have to rely on a real government-approved study which is able to establish that causal relationship between the vaccine and the reported side effects. So, I mean, we could see perhaps, potential class actions. Class actions, in fact, for the last 2 years have become legal in India, and we haven't really seen a medical class action per se just as yet, but you cannot rule that out specifically. But the point really is that, I think at the end of the day, when vaccines were introduced, to be fair to, to governments across the world and to be fair to the entire vaccination drive which India also undertook, I think it was more important to save lives in the moment. And that is when this expedited vaccine manufacturing exercise was undertaken. And there is data that suggests that a lot of lives have been saved thanks to the vaccine, and the studies which are now emerging of those rare instances in the case of AstraZeneca and a preliminary research, if not really a laboratory report, of a much higher number of potential cases in the case of Covaxin. I think both these require a much deeper examination
and investigation,
and a real report coming from governments across the world, especially in India, and then necessary action be taken as deemed fit.
Absolutely. So more details, of course, needed on those two said vaccine. On AstraZeneca, there's been a court admission. We now know there's a study that says that blood clotting as a result of vaccination through Covishield is now real and imminent. A fresh report by Banaras Hindu University are also shedding some light on what Covishield and Covaxin rather does to about 30% of the population which has reported adverse impact. This is, remember, an interview-based study, not a lab-based study. So perhaps more details and studies needed there to ascertain the impact of these vaccine in the long and the short run. But with that, it's time for a break here. We'll be back with more stories on the other side.
I don't think anybody has isolated Ajit Dada Pawar. Ajit Dada has isolated himself.
That led to a lot of bad blood between the ruling partners.
It is not true. You know it very well, who these elements are, who these individuals are. And these are the very reasons why you see a division in the party.
Now this contest between Supriya Sule and Sunetra Pawar is really a proxy war between uncle and nephew, and it's being fought in the family bastion of Baramati.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Has Allu Arjun arrived or he's just taking off?
If I really want to hit a moonshot, I want the moon.
These are big stories.
It's very unique to Indian cinema.
What would be the relevance of tradition?
I would believe that the first change has to come in the mind.
World premiere on the 18th of May, only on News 9 Live at 9 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching Business Plus. Do you often buy a product online looking at its ratings but are disappointed when it arrives? Or go to a hotel based on reviews of previous guests but end up in a shabby guest house? Fake reviews are rampant online. Online shoppers in India have been actively complaining on the National Consumer Helpline for some time now. From 95,270 complaints in 2018, the number of grievances has risen to over 4,44 in 2023, a 43% jump in complaints. In fact, the Consumer Affairs Ministry says that such reviews affect customers in hotels, tours and travel segments the most, followed by food and beverages. Good news is the union government now wants to actively tackle fake customer reviews and inflated ratings on e-commerce platforms. This is because fake or paid reviews have become a common practice. In fact, a study shows that an increase of just 1 star in ratings on Amazon correlates with at least 26% increase in sales. Consumer Affairs Ministry has therefore decided to invoke an Indian standard code to tackle the menace. The new standards prescribes specific responsibilities for reviewers and the review administrators such as the e-commerce firms. The e-commerce platforms operating in India will now have to develop a written code of practice which has to be communicated and made available to all management and staff at the firm. New rules will dictate the process of collecting, moderating and publishing online consumer reviews so that only genuine reviews are published. Once published, the platforms will not be able to either alter or edit these reviews. Now, given India's burgeoning e-commerce market, this is expected to cross over $299 billion by, remember, 2029. Fake reviews can tamper with trust and credibility of both the consumer and the platform. The new quality control order may therefore finally put a stop to this menace. And dumping of Chinese goods in India may also intensify in coming days. Federation of Indian Export Organization has warned after worsening US-China trade war. In the wake of the US imposing high duties on goods such as EVs, batteries and high-end tech products, Apex Exporters body hasn't ruled out dumping of Chinese goods in India. FIO says that China is sitting on overcapacity and one of its large markets may close its doors to it, and exporters are therefore seeking visas. Technicians, engineers are seeking visas to come to India to set shop in India, therefore warning of potential incoming of cheap, or rather not cheap, come to think, of Chinese goods coming to India. These includes EVs, batteries for sure.
You know, I have a very, very different take on this, Shweta. My take is that look at the list of items which have actually seen a hike in tariff. You know, these include electric vehicles, right? Electric vehicles are not cheap. Electric vehicles is something that India
Rather
needs.
expensive.
Right, rather expensive. Lithium-ion batteries that go into those electric vehicles, right? Your entire solar cell chemistry which goes into solar panels. Now, you know, these are sunrise sectors across the world which the entire world needs. Now, what US has done by way of hiking tariffs on Chinese imports is pretty much trying to protect its own domestic industry. US wants Tesla to sell more cars than BYD because by virtue of that, Tesla will employ more people and potentially more Americans, and in the run-up to the election season slated in November in America, you know, it's obviously going to do the American economy much better. So it's a repeat of what Donald Trump had done in his tenure as the President of the United States. Joe Biden is repeating that. So solar cells, solar panels is again something that the US needs. So I think even if you discard all the politics and even if you throw aside all the protectionist measures that US is taking, what is the total volume of trade getting impacted? It's just about $18 billion or so. So out of the entire $450 billion of trade between US and China, only $18 billion is now subjected to this higher tariff. So if China wants to continue selling those $18 billion worth of goods, there are enough and more other markets around where China can sell those goods, including India, right? But the problem really is that if you're talking about electric vehicles and if you're talking about batteries and if you're talking about solar panels, then those are in any case items that India needs. So if India is able to negotiate a better deal with China and get those products cheaper, because there is going to be an opportunity lost by way of US walking out of trade or making trade more difficult. If India can get it cheaper, I believe it's going to be a win-win. So we should not really be worried about dumping. We're not talking about some cheap plastic toys which are going to come into India and kill India's toy industry. We're not talking about cheap clothes that Sheen makes, which is going to come to India and disrupt our own handicraft and handloom sector. We are actually talking about critical sunshine sectors where there is a demand from India as well. And if you're able to negotiate a better deal with China to get those products coming into India, I think it's going to be a win for China. It's definitely going to be a win for India.
Absolutely. So I think we're looking at it more positively than many are on the outside. It does look like it could be a win-win for India if it's able to negotiate with China in order to get some of these essential items like EVs and batteries at a cheaper cost, and also perhaps an opportunity for India vis-a-vis the US to emerge as a better trading and a bigger trading partner with the US. But with that, it's time for a short break here. We'll be back with more on the other side. Stay tuned.
Has Allu Arjun arrived or he's just taking off?
If I really want to hit a moonshot, I want the moon.
These are big stories.
It's very unique to Indian cinema.
What would be the relevance of tradition?
I would believe that the first change has to come in the mind.
World premiere on the 18th of May only on News 9 Live at 9 p.m.
That ink is a semi-permanent dye called the indelible ink.
We are the sole manufacturer of this indelible ink.
Don't try to repair something which is working.
And if you have facial recognition, you can go vote in any booth anywhere based on where you are, and then it will be recorded that you can't vote anywhere else again.
Can we retire indelible ink and use biometrics? Theoretically, my answer would be yes.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
I try and convert almost everything in a kind of a mathematical formula.
You should always stretch more than you can reach.
Listening is very important.
Because if you don't listen, how would you know what the problem is?
Everybody who's working in and around me, their personal well-being is also responsibility that I carry.
Great leaders have shared vision.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
If I were to ask you to hazard a guess on which Tata Group company is the most profitable, chances are you'll say TCS. Well, you would have been right until last year, but not today. The latest quarterly results have driven in a surprise. Tata Motors has zoomed past TCS as Tata Group's most profitable entity in the fourth quarter of FY24. Hi, you're watching News 9 Live and I'm Karthik Malhotra. Let's trace the journey of Tata Motors that seems turbocharged to race ahead in the car sales as well as profitability battle. But before we proceed, well, take a moment to subscribe to the News 9 Live YouTube channel to get more such videos in your feed. Now, back to Tata Motors for now. With a consolidated net profit of about 17,500 crore rupees in the March-ended quarter, Tata Motors surpassed net earnings of TCS that stood at about 12,500 crore rupees. Well, it's a major milestone for Tata Motors after a decade-long hiatus when it first became Tata Group's blue-eyed baby. But there is a minor bump too in this journey. Even though Tata Motors has emerged as the most profitable entity of the Tata Group, it is still much smaller when compared to TCS in valuation. In fact, the market cap of Tata Motors is at about 3.49 lakh crore rupees, trailing behind India's largest IT firm TCS's mammoth market cap of 14.06 lakh crore rupees. I think it's important to look at some of the factors which have driven Tata Motors in the fast lane of profitability. So let's go over them one by one. For one, Tata Motors has jumped from a market share of just about 5.8% in 2019-2020 to 14.3% in the last financial year of FY23-FY24. In fact, it has made Tata Motors the second largest car brand in India. Tata Punch and Tata Nexon are the hottest selling products from the Tata stable and really getting Indians to queue up for deliveries. Then add to that aggressive pricing which Tata Motors has done. Aggressive pricing which has been a rather bold move by Tata Motors. Tata Nexon's price in fact was slashed by about 1,20,000 rupees and another model, Tata Tiago, received a 70,000 rupee discount. This was the first time in fact that an Indian automaker has reduced prices of cars in India, a strategy that in fact Tesla adopted in the US when Chinese BYD began overtaking it. One more interesting strategic move by the Tata Group, and this one came by way of the Jaguar Land Rover. Remember, in 2008, this was a strategic masterstroke by the Tata Motors to acquire JLR, and that now again seems to be showing results for Tata Motors. And then, of course, let's move to the biggest game changer for Tata Motors in the recent past, and that has been Tata Motors' early gamble on electric cars, and that's also now paying off. In fact, it's not just the Nexon EV or Punch EV, but even the bigger, bolder and more expensive Tata H5X is giving luxury giants like BMW and Mercedes-Benz a run for their money. Now, in many ways, one can argue that the real turnaround at Tata Motors dates back to the peak of COVID-19, and despite previous struggles and a stagnant market position, the company's decision to restructure its PV or passenger vehicle business marked a major shift. And that's when Tiago, Nexon, Harrier and Altroz set the stage for Tata Motors to push ahead, literally firing on all cylinders. In short, Tata Motors' financial comeback is a major win for Tata Sons. The group has been backing Tata Motors with capital support for a while now, and this success is a big payoff. Tata Sons has put more money into Tata Motors than any other company in its portfolio, whether listed or unlisted. So, this turnaround isn't just good news for Tata Motors, it is in fact a boost for the whole Tata Group. Now, let me give you some numbers here. Tata Motors sold just under 6 lakh vehicles last year, and in fact the exact number was 5,73,495. So if you were among these 5,73,495 people who did buy a Tata Motors car in 2023-24, write to us and describe your experience. And if you are intending to make a car purchase this year, tell us whether Tata Motors is on your consideration list or not. Until next time, thanks for watching. Goodbye. And before we end, Zoho is planning a foray into chip making and seeking incentives from the central government, according to a Reuters report. The investment is pegged at $700 million. Sridhar Vembu founded Tamil Nadu-based Zoho, which offers software as a services in 150 countries, competing with the likes of Microsoft and Salesforce all the way back in 1996. Now, Zoho is proposing to manufacture what is called compound semiconductors, which are specialized in commercial applications and are made from alternatives to the more commonly used silicon in chip making, as per the Reuters report. Now, while confirmation from Zoho and the Ministry of Electronics and IT is still awaited, Zoho's foray into semiconductors could make the next player, or rather make it the next player in India's growing semiconductor manufacturing play, after 3 plants worth over $15 billion by Tata Group and CG Power were given a go-ahead in March this year. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Plus. Thank you very much for watching. News continues right here on News9 Live.
Forever, there are simultaneous election of Parliament, Assembly and Municipality and Panchayat. So that framework has to be given in the Constitution. That amendment has been suggested.
Are you going to take away the power of dissolution?
I mean, it doesn't require any rocket science to do this. It's a simple constitutional amendment, and the idea is everything goes together.
The Law Commission has set the ball rolling for one nation, one election. Basically, if all goes well, then India may see simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha, state assemblies, municipalities and panchayats in 2029.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Has Allu Arjun arrived, or he's just taking off?
If I really want to hit a moonshot, I want the moon.